Hello, and welcome back to the Feature Crew podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This is now our second episode, and we really appreciate all the audience and viewers already who have joined us. This week, we're doing another news roundup. So Jacob has compiled a great list for us. So Jacob, do you want to kick off and tell us a little bit about what's happened this week?
Yeah. I'll give the news flash. First up, OpenAI unveiled GPT-40 Mini. So this is from last week, but we didn't get to talk about it, so we're just bringing it back up this week. It's a cost-efficient SLM, and it's priced less than GPT 3.5 Turbo. Additionally, the alpha version of their new advanced voice mode has started rolling out to select users, like a very small subset, but we see the first demo videos rolling in on Twitter. Moving over to Mistral AI, they announced their latest model, Mistral Large 2, which is a 123 billion parameter model with a 128,000 context window. It excels in code generation, reasoning. They sort of touted its frontier abilities, so kind of across the board, very performant model. Meta was in the headlines a lot this week. They made news with SAM2, which is like a real-time object segmentation model for images and videos, and it's released open source. They also decided, in less exciting news, they decided to withhold their next round of multimodal AIs from the EU due to regulatory concerns. And then back to a brighter note, Meta announced their AI Studio platform, which allows users to create and share AI characters without needing any technical skills. And it's launching just in the US to start. NVIDIA had a conference this week, so they announced a bunch of stuff. A lot of it centered around humanoid robotics, a bunch of new software platforms and services, including NIM microservices, Osmo orchestration, and they did a bunch of collabs with other brands showing off how they can generate 3D scenes and use that for marketing. Google also made the news this week announcing Gemma 2, which is a series of new models emphasizing safety, accessibility, and transparency. Most interestingly, Gemma 2 2B is a very small, maybe even tiny language model. And I see this as their first big contribution, the first new thing Google's doing, so good for them. And then, closing it out with some miscellaneous news, we saw some new web browsing agents, Agent E. We saw protests at Warner Bros. And strikes over in video game writers' circles around AI. And so let's get into it. Those are the updates.
Let's get into it. So I kind of missed it, but I'm most interested to kind of kick off and talk about the NVIDIA stuff. Humanoid robots is tell me more, because I think there definitely is a case of, we talked a little bit about last week, there's going to be an interesting section where you might have AI, it might even be AGI, but there's going to be a whole lot of work in the real world to take from, going from software, is very easy, getting into the real world, much harder. So what were they announcing and talking about more?
Yeah. So they were talking about, in the past, maybe we should level set a little bit. In the past, NVIDIA has talked about, they've mostly focused on helping manufacturers of these humanoid robots train them. So they have synthetic data training platforms. They have simulation platforms so robots can train, in simulation before real world training. And then they also, I think I remember they had some sort of lower level hardware platform to help orchestrate multiple, motors and cameras and all that stuff on robots. So they were helping in those ways. And then now they announced more, I would say higher level software platforms. So again, they were expanding on NIM, which are frameworks for simulation and learning. And then I think the new thing that I saw, I'm not sure if this is brand new, but it was the first time I saw it, was their Osmo orchestration surface, which helps. The idea is to help companies that are going to operate. It's like a fleet management system to help companies that are going to operate a lot of these robots in the real world doing real tasks.
So is it sort of, I think folks are used to drone swarms, or right? You see kind of alternative firework displays where there are drones moving around. Is that something to the effect of that, but for humanoid robots?
Yes, I think so. I think in this case, there's a bit more emphasis on human in the loop. So at least from the demos I saw, who knows how illustrative those videos are, right?
Right.
But it did look like there was a little more tracking of all the individual robots and seeing what they're all doing. Whereas in the drone swarm, I think it's mostly executing a pre-programmed sequence, right?
Fire and forget.
Yep.
This is, again, ignorant question. I need to learn more about this area. But how are humanoid robots even working? Is there a thing where you actually have better robotics that are not humanoid at all? For example, drones, great example, right? Nothing like humans, They can actually offer really interesting utility and applications. Are humanoid quote unquote robots still the thing for like actually getting work done?
I think they're a lot of people would say they're the future, right?
Yep.
I think traditionally the thing that's held back humanoid robots is it's a complicated form factor,
Yeah.
and that form factor has benefits. Chief among them are that the world is already designed for humans because it's built for us. We also are clearly pretty good at accomplishing general tasks. Like we have a pretty great design, and so if you want something that can generalize, then humanoid robot is a great form factor for that. But that also means that the software has to generalize, right? Which is something that hasn't been possible until recently, and still there are questions about how possible it is in practice. But I think the advent of these LLMs that were showing generalized capability is what really started to turn the crank on the humanoid robot development because of that generalization in intelligence. Today, there aren't really humanoid robots doing useful work, with the exception of maybe a few at the Tesla factory, and so it's the vast majority of robots have other form factors, whether that's like some sort of pallet stacking robot, mostly wheel driven robots. That are designed to accomplish a single function or a set of very similar functions.
Yeah, I sort of see it as there's two classes, right? You have your specialty robots. You see the Amazon sort of Roomba on steroids that can move the shelves, like Jacob's talking about. You see specialized drones. Of course, people are familiar with the canonical robot arm in the automotive factory, right? Those are specialized robots that are accomplishing specific things. I think the humanoid robot, why it gets so much attention, part of this is investor driven, because a humanoid robot theoretically you could drop it into an existing factory. So if you have jobs that are being done by folks and a humanoid robot can do it, you don't have to buy specialty robots. You don't have to try to market specialty robots. You can drop it into a factory. But I also think they're looking at the ability to transition to a consumer product, right? That's the dream.
Yeah.
The dream is to get people buying robots like they buy cars. So now I got to get the BMW Z4 robot, and you might only have the Hyundai robot. And so there's a competition of quality of robot, and there's a much bigger purchasing base. How often is a factory going to update the robot? I don't know, but in a sort of consumer-driven space, you could see a lot faster. I guess an increase in the rate at which you'd replace them. You might replace a robot as often as you replace a car, and I don't know where car ownership is right now. I want to say it's 4 or 5 years. People own a car and then switch it out.
I mean, it begs so many interesting questions. I think on top of that, it really does feel like it's getting sci-fi, right? Like part of the reason I'm very investor, and you can just imagine, like you go on stage, you show this off at a conference, and everyone's like, "That's crazy." On top of that, even what you're talking about is, I can't imagine the economic consequences of that. Like, how does that work when everyone has their own, effectively Roomba on steroids, like a humanoid robot that can do anything, right? I think a lot of critique with, say, LLMs at the moment, and we see it in comments all the time, of why are AI doing the cool work, right? Like when we had LLMs do like design and DALL-E and all that, everyone's like, we want art, we don't want to do laundry, or we don't want to cook. So I think there's a very obvious application for people who aren't in the industry to be like, like if this thing can just replicate what a human can do, it can go ahead and do those manual, menial tasks that I don't want to do, as opposed to the cool, like design work that I really want to do. But it's interesting that we've got there much faster with the design work because there's so much more data, right? Anything digital, so much easier to train on, whereas we don't necessarily record ourselves doing laundry. We don't have things typically do laundry at that point. So how do you learn?
There's no perfect database of all available objects you would use laundry on.
And I do wonder how. Sorry.
No, So I was in the Internet of Things space for a while. I was at a startup called Silk Labs that later got acquired by Apple, and we'd have this problem all the time where there was a lot of interest in manufacturers for putting some sort of object detection or some sort of computer vision into their products. But for example, say you have a smart fridge. The first question you get asked in that board meeting where they're saying, hey, are we going to buy your tech stack and implement it, is, can you detect every object in a fridge? And the answer is no, probably not, right? Because we don't have a full data set of all the possible things you could put in a fridge. And not just all the possible things, but all the things in every state of decay or orientation or lighting. And that's been this problem. So I think for a while there's been this consumer desire for intelligence in the physical world, but
Hmm.
I think the question is, are we ready? Is there some breakthrough now that enables that?
I mean, maybe Jacob knows a bit more as well. I need to get up to speed with the literature here. But I wonder how LLMs do with generic, physical reasoning, right? And do they actually, understand when like an object's on the table or whatever? I think this gets to the very like
Yeah.
philosophical question with like any kind of artificial intelligence of does it understand like humans? There's also the follow on of does it even need to understand like humans, or is pattern recognition alone enough?
Right.
But sorry, Jacob, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a mixed bag on that front.
Yeah.
Like, there's your example of does it know that the thing is on the table? Oh, the apple's on the table, right? Like, we see questions like that performing extraordinarily well in like image understanding benchmarks, right? For like the multimodal LLMs. And so some amount of understanding of the world clearly LLMs have.
Right.
I think they completely lack like and spectacularly fail at things that require like understandings of the rules of the world and how the world works.
Yeah.
So like physics, let's say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, oh, I placed this apple on the table and then I cut a hole diameter 3 meter around the apple on the table. What happens, right? It's like, it doesn't. It's not going to be able to figure out that the apple and that circle of wood fall through and fall to the floor. And so this is where something like, if you watch during a full self-driving session, like a Tesla will actually understand how the world works and will understand to a certain extent how things move and what they're likely to do and how their momentum and the objects around them affect those decisions. And so it's not that it's not that AI can't, it's not that machine learning can't tackle this problem. It just seems that the multimodal LLMs we have today are behind on their understanding of the real world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think we'll talk about it in a bit, but the meta work for SAM, like being able to detect objects, seeing that they can track an object in a complex scene feels like a building block to get there. But I wanted to circle back to a point Jacob was making on sort of training these things, right? Like, can you train them? Can a non-programmer train one of these robots? I think if you're talking about a consumer market, we may not have to have the robot come installed with an understanding of every object in your home. But if I have to show it more than 2-3 times, this starts to feel like I'm doing a job on behalf of a tool I purchased rather than the tool helping me. So I think there's a meta question of, can we stack enough intelligence to make it that I can show it an object once, explain what it is. Like easy example is I take a t-shirt and I fold it in front of it how I like and I put it down. If I can do that 2 or 3 times and it gets it, and now it knows all t-shirt objects should be folded this way, that's an iPhone moment. I think then you're off to the races. Everybody's happy. But if it's failing even 80%, even 20% of the time, I think people are just going to pull their hair out and be like, screw it, I'll just go back to doing it myself.
Yeah, and of course, I think we're jumping to humanoid robot as a like personal product, which of course we are because I want that robot. I don't want to do my laundry anymore, right? But then there's also like there's the reality that in the ways that tools like Copilot or even like sort of custom built AI automations are what's providing value right now, more so than let's say personal AI is more still like a toy or a fun thing to use.
That's a great point.
And for the same problems where like personal AI really needs to truly understand the user and understand your preferences and understand what you want, and the AI tools that we have today just aren't quite there yet, and we're seeing them very quickly approach that point. So like it's not going to be far behind, but I think we'll see useful robots providing value in factories a while before they're providing value in the home.
Yeah, I think it's worth calling out. This feels like a separate wave, right? Like AI will be ubiquitous. Digital assistants will be ubiquitous long before AI powered humanoid robots in the home will be there. It takes a lot of time to put atoms together and actually build these things. Not to mention, I can't even imagine the regulatory framework you have to get around for like, I'm going to put this very heavy metal object that can autonomously move its very heavy arms in my home.
It is unpredictable, right? Like, really, when we're talking about, we mentioned NVIDIA Osmo earlier, and we're talking about like, the regulatory things around humanoid robots. Like, this is a Skynet question. This is actually the Skynet question. So it makes sense that there will be some regulatory attention there, right?
Think 2 things of the jailbreaking potential and also how we as a society want to deal with the fine-tuning question, right? Because theoretically fine-tuning will be possible, but how
Right.
much do you want it to be fine-tuned, right? Like imagine you say, hey, to Chris' example, here's how I want you to fold the t-shirt. But instead of folding the t-shirt, you're strangling a person. Like that's kind
Right.
of now merging the two together. Can you like override things? Can you make it do somewhat illegal
Right.
things?
What are the limits on what you're allowed to train it to
What
do?
limits you're allowed to train it to do, right?
Yeah,
Can you just give it full autonomy and be like, hey, actually, I want you to just like go around screaming at night. That is correct. That is what I want you to do. And then who's like, is it the manufacturer's problem? Is it the person who's trained a problem? Because technically you can do that. I mean, this is now getting to like a little bit weird, but like you could probably teach a kid that, right? Like that's, I don't think that's illegal. Maybe you're a bad parent. Maybe it's illegal. I'm not too sure. But feasibly, a robot will have no understanding of what is right or wrong, right? Those are entirely human-derived traits. So where does the blame kind of lie? And again, this is the interesting kind of questions that I think arguably we're not really in a good position to answer yet until we get to this critical mass. So I think it's an interesting time to be in this space because in the next couple of years, especially if you do have that consumer-facing robot, people are going to be like, huh. They'll probably start asking these questions, and hopefully we have the ability to, you know, in a democratic way, decide what is, you know, the best way to approach it. But I don't think we're talking about that enough. And given how fast this is going, this doesn't seem like something that's going to happen in like 100 years. It might be in the next 10 years, right? This is already news we're talking about. And as you say, like, yeah, it will probably have, you know, enterprise results first. And that makes sense because it's going to be way more data. But consumer-facing products are just around the corner, and there is such a first-mover advantage, right? Like you said, it will be an iPhone moment if you nailed it correctly the first time. So, yeah, exciting times.
And since we were talking about like some potential regulatory action, maybe this is a good segue into like Meta's decision to withhold their multimodal models from the EU. And they cited regulatory uncertainty, but I think it's you know it's pretty clear that they're not the first tech company. Apple was the first one to say we're going to delay Apple Intelligence in the EU. This is now becoming a trend of the, let's say, more stringent regulations in the EU pushing companies out. And in the past, companies have tended to follow the EU's lead and take the hit, even when they didn't want to, for the most part. And so to see such high-profile cases of companies deciding to sort of go the other way is interesting to me. I'm curious what you guys think.
Personally, I just think this is a speed thing, right? Like there is, and we can talk about like earnings and stuff, but there's huge expenditure, and I think there's definitely a race to be first here. Again, first mover advantage in all aspects of the AI race. And I think previously it was okay to be a bit slower, make sure you're fully compliant with GDPR because, like, you know, big fines or whatever. But I kind of see it as a thing of just why, like, compete if it's going to slow you down, right? You're talking about these like multi-trillion-dollar opportunities, and slowing down for 6 months might mean you give up that advantage.
Right.
So I think for them, it's definitely like a momentum play, right? Like if you are first and you get this massive business in the US, you can always go back and get it for the EU. And, you know, I think they do that, or they're now implementing the AI EU Act. So I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot of follow-on work and stuff for us. But I think right now, like that's kind of my optics. It's really just a speed thing, and they're like, you know, it's not worth competing. We might as well just pull out of this market. Yeah, Chris, what are your thoughts?
It's probably worth saying for the audience why first mover matters in AI, right? Because in a lot of spaces, canonically, the first mover just takes all the arrows and dies, and then the next company comes after it and succeeds, right? I mean, you saw this in social media, right? Facebook wasn't first by any stretch of the imagination, but they had learned the lessons of the competitors before, and they came with a better offering that's overly simplistic, so Meta folks don't get at me. But that was the thing, was that you don't want to be first. But I think Google broke that metaphor for folks because Google proved that being first to the right technology, especially a technology that learns and gains with every user interaction, means that you can have a runaway advantage that's really hard to compete with, right? No search engine came close to competing with Google at scale globally because they had the data early, and then every day they had more users than their competitor, their model got that much better. And so I think one of the working hypotheses for AI is that that's true again. So OpenAI is considered to have such an advantage. Why? I think one of the big reasons is it was one of the fastest growing consumer products in history. They have all this user data. They can train on everything these users are doing within reason. I know there's ways to turn that off, but a lot of folks aren't doing that. They're just using the service. kind of in default settings.
Enough folks aren't doing that yet.
Right, exactly. Enough folks aren't, and so that's why we talk about first mover advantage being so important here. Is you're getting this massive amount of training that makes your model that much better. And so if you're making your model that much better at a rate that your competitors can't, and you're getting that much better data to do that, there is a flywheel effect there that you wouldn't see in something like smartphones or other devices that don't have this training, or other applications that don't have this training element.
I think just to double click on that, maybe it's not fully well understood yet, but when you say flywheel, that's a scary thing about this, next wave, is it's not just, a program or software. It is something that can legitimately continue to gain intelligence. And there's even been heaps of interesting papers this week talking about almost this whole concept of takeoff, where you get a model that's smart and it can teach other models or be taught, and you kind of get this effect where it's maybe smarter than humans, and then it can just continue to teach itself and get way smarter. We'll probably have entire podcast episodes about the singularity and how realistic that might be and so on. But in effect, we're even seeing in papers coming out as recently as this week that is totally doable. So being first and getting more data with something that can actually continue to improve means you could have a massive, multi-year technological advantage over your competitors in a very short amount of time. And even to your point, Chris, about OpenAI, I think most consumers don't think of necessarily AI. They would say I need to go use ChatGPT, as opposed to saying a large language model, right? It's kind of like an iPhone, I need to Google it, right, instead of saying search it. Kind of
Kleenex.
Exactly. That impression is so critical, especially given all the consumer-facing advantages here.
Well, and part of the way you know this is true is look how competitors are implementing their AI. There's a reason Google's putting it in their search query result when you search anything in Google.
And Meta's doing the same thing, right?
Meta in the bar.
Yep.
That's why they're trying to gain this. They're trying to get back they feel like they're losing to OpenAI. Yep. They need to get more training data, put it on a high interaction spot on your application, get a lot of user intent. They might have some problem with that, though, because I'm not sure that people use a ChatGPT input box the same way they use the search box on Instagram and Facebook. But any training data is better than none, so I guess you're trying to just move as fast as you can to make up that loss you're feeling.
We kind of lost Chris a bit there, but
Chris is back.
Chris is back. So. I totally agree. It's a different modality, and we're probably pivoting way away from the actual topic, but I just don't know whether they have it, right? It is interesting that they're trying to put all these things in, but is it really going to work? I wonder if it's just this huge catch-up game. I am interested to see, I don't think they talked about it much, any of these companies, really about the impact of these, kind of tacked on AI things. Did Meta announce how much usage they're really getting? It feels everywhere on Instagram and Facebook and stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's I remember seeing and looking on Twitter was quickly becoming the most used AI product in the world.
Right.
Yeah. And so sure, right? Maybe Google's AI summaries as they come back is going to be the most most used AI product in the world. But does it matter if you took it away? Would people care? Does it actually improve your product? Right? Does it make you any more money? Right? That key question.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's so there's a question of intentional use here, right? I think that's and they know that if they actually tried to have intentional use, that the metrics will look a lot worse, because no one's really being wow, yeah, I'm so excited for mid AI in my search box. They're probably what is this shit? I'm trying to do something else. So I think they really don't want to double click too hard on those metrics yet until they're really printing money, as you say.
Right. Yep. I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think they're not. It's not even that they're not printing money. I don't think they're making any money. They're not making any money.
They're just making loss.
And so they're just taking a loss, and it just kind of if they can keep it out of capex but not call it, but not have to focus too much on it, right? Then it's maybe a happy middle ground. But then I think this gets to we've talked in the past on this podcast about. Maybe there is some. I think last week it was we were talking about the personal AIs. This is my sort of AI interpreter for the world. It's the AI me that you go through to get to the real me. And so seeing Facebook this week, or Meta put out the AI Studio, where you can create AI characters, no code. I didn't get to look into this much. I think I'll pull it up. share the screen, but I think it's like we were almost a little prophetic last week because it looks like they're hopping on this train.
It's building on that sort of like personal front of house thing, right? Like this is the AI version you encounter first, and then I could talk to the real me. It makes sense to me. I mean, you see like folks like Mr. Beast translating all their videos, making channels in other countries. This feels like an extension of that, right? Am I automatically sort of getting that treatment for my Instagram account? So having an AI version of me means it's fluent in every language the AI model knows. It means it can answer questions 24/7, and it's this filtering mechanism to give me leads if they get by whatever filters are there.
Yeah,
right. And I think, and it's interesting because I think what they've started with, they call them AI characters, which they're terming them, like branding them closer to what Chris is talking about, where it's this character. But when you look at, I'm just looking at the screenshots they have here, like guess my sign, book nerd. These aren't characters; these are GPTs, right? This is like basically, somebody came in and swapped the system prompt, and that's what this whole product is, right? So it's like, okay, is this actually that exciting? AI is based on your interest, and then here is what Chris is talking about: AIs that are an extension of you. Right. So engage with your audience. This is exactly what you were talking about. Maybe Meta should hire you.
And I think I expect this to go very poorly at first, for what it's worth. Like I don't expect this to work right off the gate. I think it'll feel I think authenticity is part of the whole creator economy, and this will feel very inauthentic for a long time. So until this gets normalized, I think they're just trying to. I think it's an experiment. You put it out there, see what happens.
But I think, two things. First of all, the thing you were showing before, it just feels like they're really re-implementing character AI. And there's that whole set of concerns we talked about last time, particularly for younger audiences.
Yeah.
But here with this specific celebrity-based thing, I think if it eventually goes well, it's really bad, actually. It's going to reinforce parasocial relationships in a way that has never been done before.
Unprecedented,
Like, it's just, character AI, we talk about how it's kind of, morally a bit gray to be like, oh, can I have feelings for this AI character? And you know what? Look, it's role play. You probably, even with books, right? You could imagining a scenario like, like I'm going on a date with this person, whatever, right? Like I'm sure like kids have done that for forever, and it's part of being human. But here, having this entire thing where you can interact with a celebrity that you follow and you track them, like I see this being, it's going to be very interesting to see how it works in the K-pop world, right? Like they already like, the whole idea of K-pop stars and stuff like that. Yep. Like I can imagine this going crazy, right? Like they have that next level of just commitment to following their group or whatever. And if they could have talked to it 24/7, I don't know, it would be very interesting to see how that goes. Like it probably would be a very successful consumer product once it gets normalized. But I think it begs the question of, just because we can do it, should we do it? Right. This kind of gets towards the kind of dystopia thing where I think there's going to be definitely this kind of curve of you have a few people who are like, whoa, like imagine you're this massive celebrity. Suddenly you have this amazing product and your reach is expanded and your fans are even more like, fully committed and so on. So you could probably make tons of money. But then you have a long tail of people who are just kind of left on the sides, right? Like economic distribution wise. So what are your two thoughts on particularly the parasocial?
My thoughts are a little less deep. They're more around this idea of like we're gonna get a lot of great memes out of this in the short term. Like
that's what I'm talking about.
No, just like it's gonna be awesome because there are already plenty of memes where people like message celebrities and then if they respond or if oh my god, if they say something funny, like if they have some sort of funny response, that's gonna blow up. And so I'm just thinking about like the overlap of AI hallucinations / funny failures and then celebrity DM memes. It's like, this is going to be incredible.
I think it's worth calling out. If you scroll up a little bit to that first sort of splash screen at the top of the page, or the first header, it strikes me that they don't have a lot of faith in this product.
Yes.
Like if I've been sitting in the designer view, is Sammy the stress ball really the first thing we want to see? Is that the main like example to folks of what you can make, followed by Guess My Sign, the book nerd, and rolling aces? I don't know what AC something.
And that's why it's kind of interesting, right? Because like you called the creator AI side, and then it felt like they had to do the character AI side because character AI has more usage than meta AI or whatever, right? And like maybe they're concerned, like you said, about how is this like creator AI thing going to work out? Is it going to get adoption from the users? Is it going to get adoption from the celebrities? But then this was like I'm just thinking in the business decision, this was like the compete character AI doing really well. Now we have to do it, right?
But even for calling it character AI, the first few of these aren't characters. Sammy the Stress Ball is a character, but Guess My Sign's not a character.
No, that's
the
a
book
GPT.
nerd is maybe sort of a character, but it feels more like the name of a bookstore. Like it feels very it feels very GPT.
I mean, to play devil's advocate here, though, I think most consumers don't understand the difference yet, right? And I think that might have been part of the decision is just, I guess we can make real people and fake people. That's kind of how I'm seeing them, like, picture this. And it could just be because 12-year-olds really don't understand the difference between what is, a GPT versus what is, like, something like, I fine-tuned or whatever. Like, so I think it might be just as simple as that, as they were like, we have to kind of do this, and I'm sure there's probably discussions where like creator AI is probably not going to be so good. We make a terrible AI character like Sammy the Stress Ball, and the MAL on that is incredibly better than creator AI, and they're just going to be like, damn, I guess we have to do this. So maybe that's part of their decision, right? Like character AI has been like, from what I can see, a runaway success. So they're probably just like, they just.
If anybody has a good sense of what the general public's awareness of these topics are, it's going to be Meta, right?
Yeah.
Way more than Google, way more than Microsoft, way more than any of these folks. They will have this knowledge of what 2-3 billion, I forget what their numbers are at nowadays, are how they're engaging with technology. So yeah, maybe they're right.
And honestly, I think it is a case of just kind of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, right?
Yeah,
like this seemed to be something that worked, and now they're like, hey, like let's put it in front of users. And for them, it's probably a case of just if they win, market share from character AI, or people are now, I don't know, maybe it might just, I've been saying kids, but it could be, like Facebook mums or something, right? They're just like, oh, let me talk to my Guess My Sign AI instead of going to BuzzFeed, and maybe they win business like that. And then I don't really know how they monetize it, right? Like this is all a free offering. So I assume at some point, are they trying to get more ads in?
Are
they really just trying to keep you? Right? It's got to be ads, but are they? I don't know how you show ads here, right? Guess My Sign, you talk to it, and then suddenly it just like spits out an ad, or like, are they trying to like, sell like signal to like
get a personalized astrology calendar based on this conversation.
Before we move on to ad, I think there's a whole conversation to be had on ads and AI and where that's going. We can do that now. We can do that later. But I wanted to make one more point on this, which is that it's almost a little funny that we're talking about it because this product is complete table stakes. Like, GPTs, Microsoft, we have an offering, like character AI, like everybody has done this. Right. I even think I saw something from Google that was similar. And so it's like, they what's maybe interesting here is that like creator AI piece where they're doing something a little more Facebook, a little more Facebook specific, right?
Yep.
It'll be interesting times. And
I mean, oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I was going to say with the character AI, even this idea that, you're saying memes and stuff like that. I wonder, again, this big philosophical question, how do we determine authenticity and how do we determine what is real or not? I'm surprised this is coming out before the election, honestly, because there is... I doubt they're going to make politician characters or whatever, but I could totally see people trying to prompt one of these character AIs to say something either political or offensive, and then be like, this celebrity character AI said this, and then they might have to say like, oh, it's not me though. But clearly this AI is based on you, so does it represent your views?
Yeah.
So I wonder how that's going to go. I'm sure it's going to be a topic of discussion moving forward, but I think there's still this overarching thing of, in the age of AI, the next couple of years, there's already a ton of just misinformation, fake news, stuff like that. How do we combat that? Especially as personal AI assistants become more of a thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's probably an open question right now.
My take is, at least in this case, like I don't think we do. Like if you're chatting to something that's clearly an AI version of somebody and putting too much stake in what it says, like at first, I think you're right. There are going to be a bunch of news articles. It's going to be, like all over the place. But I think pretty quickly it's going to become, you don't trust the thing with a big AI logo next to it that it's going to be the real person, right?
But how do you deal with people photoshopping that off? So easy.
Yeah, but
right?
It's also so easy to Photoshop a message into that's trending forever, right?
You're right. Yeah. So I guess maybe there's no actual difference, but maybe there will be clickbait, as you said at the start. But you're right.
Probably. And maybe the real difference is that just over time, like, yeah, you've already been able to Photoshop a message history with a celebrity, but that hasn't stopped people from posting fake message histories with celebrities that get traction, right? And so it's like, you know, maybe actually there's just gonna be a moment of reckoning where it's like, okay, actually now no one trusts those things anymore, right? Which might actually be a good thing. A screenshot of a message chat with allegedly a famous person is not a great piece of evidence. Never has been, but now it's really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's
Sure.
worth saying this happens with all forms of media too, right? Like the mail even had this problem, right? It's like, oh great, we can all send each other messages. Oh shoot, the problem is we can all send each other messages, right? So now now you have the Nigerian prince scam. I think you're going to have a new generation of that, and then we'll build cultural immunities to that, and there'll be a new awesome scam that comes out of the next tool. So it's surfing more than it's solving. I think you just got to keep it's an arms race between fraud and then the ability for the culture to detect fraud.
Right.
Like this sort of gave rise to live stream, right? The fact that you could fake video and images, live streams became popular. So now you do the thing live and show like, yeah, here's how I prove I got a message from a celebrity is I show my phone up to the camera and scroll it and tap in the app in real time. Because the making a fake Instagram app is a bit of a bridge too far right now to sell a scam, but maybe not for long. I was curious about some of this miscellaneous news, though. Jacob, what do we know about Agent E? I don't know fully what that is. We love the agent space.
So this is an agent that's focused on web browsing, and it some of the key innovations are like how the agent actually interacts with its world space and how it's able to understand its world space, and it does through with the DOM and accessibility tools and taking screenshots. So it's like a multimodal sensing approach, and then the action space is like fairly limited. You don't need that many actions to interact with the internet. Click on an element, enter text. Yeah, and so then this is where we're also talking about how there were like learnings from the autogen and the multi-agent learnings, and getting better performance when you have multi-agent systems and allow them to specialize on certain elements of the task. And then finally we got to the benchmarks, where we see Agent E is state of the art in most of these benchmarks, but also I think the important piece is that it's like a quick growth, right? Like a lot of it's a big change, and so whenever we see that, like we can expect new applications of this sort of thing and new refinements on this sort of idea to come soon, and I'm excited to see what that is, because like you can get a lot of use out of a smart and capable web browsing agent, because you can do a lot on the web.
Yeah. Maybe worth level setting for the audience, like why agents matter versus normal AI. We're talking about things that can take a given goal and start executing against them in a way that's not just a single step. Most people might be using ChatGPT or otherwise, where you give a single command and it comes back. I've said it way too many times in private to these two, but it's the remote control stage of AI, right? Where you're like, you press a button, you get a result, but nothing else is happening. Agents sort of represent a step beyond that, where I've given my agent a goal, and it might do a series of steps. It might try those same steps a few different ways and assess its own output, building towards the outcome I asked it to achieve. So autonomous working a little more than just responding to a simple query.
Yeah. I think it's worth calling out that this is starting to get to more of an iPhone moment, right? Like when you actually say, go do this, and it's actually a non-trivial task. Right now, you can still get some pretty impressive results when you say, make me this email or help me summarize. I mean, even when you look at, speaking of iPhone moments, Apple Intelligence, a lot of it is really just summarize this or do this. There's no real magic. But imagine you say, hey, like, I need to go like get this thing done, but I don't have the time. Can you go do that for me? And it can actually go work on it for like an hour and come back with something meaningful. Then suddenly people are like, wow. Like I think one of the Agent E examples I saw was, it was basically told, hey, like go find a jersey for my son, or some kind of like young child, and it had to infer like, oh well, this child I know is like this size, and so I need to go look for this. Oh, I checked this website, it's out of stock, so let me go somewhere else. So it did this actually really useful multi-step process, instead of saying, like right now the concept would be go to Amazon and buy X. Now you say, go find me the best price on this and come back and tell me when it's in my cart. So now you can be a lot less hands-on and still get an amazing result. I think people are going to be like, that's kind of useful because, I mean, the very obvious, consumer benefit here is suddenly it's almost like a real person, like really intelligent. And then there's, multiple phases after that. But I think it's exciting to see this being, open sourced and there being more progress. I think agents really are going to be the next kind of step here that consumers are probably going to be like, wow, this is super useful.
Yeah. I think it's worth asking, does this lead to a personalization of the internet? I think we'll have episodes on this sort of expanding, but right now, the way you use the internet is I go to a website, and aside from what items are shown and how they're filtered, the website looks the same for you as it does for me, right?
Yep.
Your Amazon homepage will have different items, but the layout will be the same, assuming we're in the same test group. I mean, I know there's some complexity here with how these websites A/B test different views, but it's very rare, if ever, am I getting a unique treatment of a website. But to that example of a jersey, you could imagine that a step down this line starts to become, take content from the internet and bring it to me and arrange it in a way that makes sense to me.
Yep.
And that's very different than browsing where I go to a website that's laid out a specific way by the company. This is now like the company providing information to something that then arranges it for me in a unique way.
Yeah.
Does that change how we work, how we deal with data on the internet, right? Do I have this personal browser? It feels wrong because browser still implies website. It's like, do I have this personal representational layer all the time? I don't know.
I think that's exactly it. Like, I think it starts to re-examine, like, what are we even doing on the internet, right? As you say, like, I think representation layer is like the right kind of term, although it might be excessively complex. I think it really is like you're still wanting to interact with data in a certain way, and how that gets presented so far has not been changed, right? It's like, imagine every book or every piece of media you consume is now tailored to exactly how you want it or need it, right? Like there's this, again, this moves towards, in my opinion, the kind of utopia that AI offers, wherein things really just feel better for everyone. And that's likely because it's personalized for everyone. Everyone has different learning styles. Everyone has different, preferences for aesthetics or function. So I think it will be interesting. I also do wonder how agents interact in this sort of space where everything is different, right? Like, do we really need to take a step back and now be like, it is about the data and the not about the representation, but about the data and all that, because we can have, deep dive engineering and design and PM discussions about this, where we can talk about the internet being kind of poorly designed at the moment, and in terms of like how fast we like do things and like text and stuff like that. So that obviously makes it hard for agents to function. But maybe later on, when we do have these kind of higher level views of how people want to interact with the world, maybe it makes it a bit easier for them to like traverse and personalize and things like that.
I mean, if you folks want a book on this, quick plug for my favorite technology book is What Technology Wants by Kevin Kelly. A little older at this point, but Kevin Kelly used to be in charge of Wired Magazine. He was kind of the editor of Wired Magazine. And it's more of a philosophic text of like, if you personified technology, what does it want? What does it tend to strive towards? And he talked about this. He had this insight coming out of music. Like, one of the consequences of Napster, one of the consequences of music being easily accessible was that music would start getting remixed for the audience, and that would over time, technology would make that easier and easier. So you wouldn't just hear a new song; you might hear a song that was tailored to you. And I guess the closest to this is a Spotify radio station right now, where we're not modifying the songs themselves, but what songs you get in what order will be different for each individual person, and that trend just feels like it scales with the rest of the internet, right?
Well, I mean, I always thought that was going to be the obvious play of Meta, was that they wanted all this AI and so on so that they could then effectively create video exactly how you wanted it. Already we see algorithmic video being so popular compared to what we previously had. Like, we can have entire episodes on brain rot and so on, but I really feel that it gets scary right now, even with just random videos, recommendations and so on get so good that you're just like, this is amazing. Now imagine that you can create any video you want on demand and cheap enough so that we know exactly what you want to watch, and we're going to keep on serving you. Like, that's another layer of dopamine rush that we just haven't even played with.
Right, it takes it from nowadays. Meta and others are taking a bunch of content and curating it for you. Now they could generate it, right? They could say, okay, I know what you want. and here it is. Especially if you have character AIs, right? There's no
Right.
limit to
Character
the idea that
AIs.
a character AI can be DMing a million people at once, customized to those people's tastes.
Correct. And then, I mean, this is where like Sora and stuff comes in, right? Or like Clan,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the
yeah.
other competitor is. Like you just create personalized brain rot, right? Just infinite Subway Surfer plus whatever content you actually want. I wonder how like addicting that gets, right? And like if you can
Right?
make it like
Yeah, yeah.
cheap, like, you know, if you're like, wow, we made like 10 videos for $0.01, but the advertiser has paid us 2 cents and our user is just straight like plugged into the matrix. They have no shot of wanting
Right.
to like hop off. It's a great, I mean, I hate to say it, it's a great business model, right? Because
Sure.
you just have infinite attention. But again, it does get to the point of it's kind of a scary consequence here.
Yeah, I mean, I have maybe a bit more utopian view on this, which is like,
Yeah.
you know, clearly right now, like this is just another thing. You don't need AI to generate brain rot and make that be like a huge percent of what the young kids are watching, right? Like,
Yeah.
brain rot has such a huge brain share right now, which is like ridiculous. But I don't think it's going to go up much with AI. In fact, I would hope and I imagine that the opposite will happen, right? Which is that, hey, you are, as you have always been, or at least for the last couple of years, you're facing this tsunami of brain rot and of Subway Surfers and a podcast and another video, right? Like stacked on top of each other. And then it's like, yeah, and to a certain extent, like we're saying, we get it because it's like firing all the dopamine and this is the best thing for your brain or whatever. But then it's, and so, yeah, that like mid TV show that's like the third reboot of some franchise your mom loved, right? Like isn't competing. But then maybe if you know, Google, like, or let's say Disney Plus AI or Apple TV AI can generate like the show or the movie that's perfect for you, maybe that can compete with the brain rot, you know? And so that's my slightly
I like it.
happier view of the situation, I guess. And,
Well,
and it comes from a personal thing, which is that, like, I don't know if y'all have ever, like, you know, it was sort of pithy when I said it before of, like, yeah, rebooting the series for a third time, but that's, like, most entertainment now is, like, some third-tier reboot of a series, and, like, you know, the original fans hate it, and then the secondary fans hate it, and then the new people like it, and then give up on it, and it's, like, you know, Disney's is in a bit of a hurt situation because they're losing their Marvel fans, and they're losing their classic Disney fans, and so it's like, hey, maybe you don't need to try to do this impossible problem of make content for everybody or make content for the loudest people or whatever it might be. It's like, oh, you can actually just make content for one person.
Yeah. I mean, that leads us into the sort of last miscellaneous topic, right? Video game performers protesting.
Yes.
So there's part of this ongoing question of how does society react to technologies that are changing the way creative content's made, right? If I can generate an infinite amount of voices, do I still pay humans to make these voices? Do I still pay them to be in these applications? Certainly from the pure economics perspective, you got the business case to say no, but then there's sort of a more humanist, artist-centric case that says, well, don't we want to keep artistry alive at the human level?
I see Jacob's got the article up here, right?
Yeah, I pulled up the article. I just, like, it was mostly for B-roll there, but there are, like, some interesting points here about just, like, you know, how many people were out at the protest. It was, you know, it was a group, right? Like, it made news. And I think, you know, I think the other key point is this has been going on for a long time behind the scenes. At least the organizers for the event were like, oh, yeah, we've actually been, like, we've been talking, we've been negotiating for months. And so this isn't new. And I don't think this is the last we're going to see of
No. Yeah.
You know, this sort of, like, rough transition.
Yeah.
And I say that because it's going to happen. Like, this goes back to there is no third option from last week, right? Like, and I think entertainment is going to be one of the last industries to realize that there is no third option, but they might be hit the most by it.
100%. And I think one interesting thought here is, I wonder how we as a society change based on entertainment being personalized. Like, I just was thinking back to when you talk about, like,
right.
Imagine like 20 years ago, like Friends and so on, everyone watched at the same time, and you had this kind of shared understanding and shared kind of character in your mind of like, oh, that's a Chandler or that's a whatever. Like, there was definitely a shared understanding of characters. imagine you watch your exact specific like rendition of a Marvel movie, and you're like, this was so good. Remember when this character did X? And then you go talk to another person, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I had a completely different
Right.
movie playing, and it was way better than yours. Maybe not. It's not a comparison then, but I'm just getting to the point of personalization is this double-edged sword as well, where like I wonder if there's going to be a not shared understanding of say characters and so on, and I wonder how that then impacts the entertainment industry. I do still think there's a time and place for like authenticity and this shared sort of community, right? So there might be a bit of a tug between the two of hyper specialized content where you're like, this is unique to me, this is like art, I understand it, versus I actually want a shared space and a shared community where we all watch this and react to this. So maybe entertainment is actually well positioned to like have a bit of a, like say in all these things and push it in a certain direction.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, I think it's a yes and sort of thing. I think in technology we kind of have this temptation to say things replace other things.
Yeah.
But almost no technology has been formally replaced. There's just been a different emphasis. So like radio still exists, theater still exists, movies still exist, TV shows still exist. They may have had their heyday, right? Certainly, I don't think anyone's arguing theater's heyday is now, but there was a heyday, and then it's sort of like energy waves or something, right? Like other things get more energy than they did before, and it gets redistributed. So I think you're right. There is the hyper-specific content, and it's not clear what works for that. Like maybe part of watching a movie is we all view the same content, so therefore hyper-specific movies don't work, but hyper-specific social media accounts might. Or it's hard to say where we want this hyper specificity, or if it's just the content comes to me in a unique way. I'm browsing it, I get to build my own space and consume it in a certain way, even if the things I consume are shared artifacts. I don't know. I think it's super interesting.
Yeah. I think people don't actually want to build stuff. I think the few I have every reason to think that builders are a very small percent of people, and so I actually see a world in which, like, in the same way that we have creators are a very small percent of people, and most people are watching content. We have recently become creators. We have all spent most of our life watching content, and so I think there'll be a similar thing, right? Where like some people, certainly Chris, will want to make some cool like ancient history TV show, and then people can watch that. People can remix it. Maybe it's automatically remixed for them, like it's tweaked to be more interesting to them. It follows a different character through ancient Rome because that character would be more interesting to that person. And then I think there is an interesting world in which one person can build a whole world and a way more interesting story, and maybe more than a story, right? Like interconnected stories. And so I do see this world where it's like, the flip side to the coin of like what Dylan said, which is, maybe it's I got this version, you got this version, it's different, and that's disconnected. Maybe it's actually, that's cool because I saw a different part of the world. And now there's this whole, what are people going to do when they don't work anymore? Like, maybe some people are just reconstructing the lore of this fake world that Chris has created with an AI. And now all the viewers have seen different parts of it. And so they're reconstructing the lore and sharing and discussing it, and that's leading to more and more stories in this world. Like, I think entertainment in the AI future is beautiful.
Finds a way. I mean, I think video games are more set up to be replaced by AI than other fields. Because like movies, you can make the case there's a distinct performance. What gamers want a lot of time, especially out of single-player content, is novelty, right? I want to walk into the Skyrim pub, and so part of the problem with performers, part of the problem in the performer's case is that what the user wants is that when I go into a pub in Skyrim or Elder Scrolls 7, that character uniquely talks to me about things I did, people I talked to, how I approached last time, did I order a beer last time? And so there's already this user desire, and you see RPGs getting more and more complex over time. There's already this deep user desire to have customized character interactions. So different than film, where film, I think people want to see the same movie so they can talk about it. Games already don't operate this way. Like if you have a multiplayer match and I have a multiplayer match, we had different stories happen to us. We had different events. We had different players in our lobby. And so I think it's a much harder case to make in games.
I would say that the biggest fans of a movie, or the people who love that movie the most, they have the extended edition and the special edition and the director's commentary. And so I don't know if I actually believe that people want to see the same thing, right? Like, I just think that's a limitation of movies. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. You have this entire economy built around reacting to movies and talking about movies, and if we can't talk about the same shared service, even those additions, you're talking most of the time minor changes, Ridley Scott notwithstanding. There are.
But to be fair, there's potentially a bigger industry for spoiler-free reviews, right? Like people, I mean, it might not be bigger, right? Maybe a lot of people consume content via reviews that are spoiler reviews, but a lot of people check out reviews before they go see something, and so it's like, a review of my experience in this AI created world is kind of a spoiler-free review. I'm talking about the vibe. How well did Chris do at creating the vibe of ancient Rome, and how well did my experience go? And then I can make a recommendation. So should you have your own adventure in this world, right? I think it all kind of tracks.
I think games track for that more than movies. Yeah, I'm with you. I get you.
But I think the meta point here is, I think I agree to your point of like entertainment being pretty awesome in the AI world, is that people want community, right? They want to find an experience or group of people who share a similar interest and have a greater experience with those people. And I think that is where the awesome things, like either you go like hyper personalized, or you can like find a community. Like, you might be like, as you say, it's a sandbox. It's all about like one story and you'll have different experiences, but you've still found that tribe of people that want to experience that. And then you can choose whether you share the same experience or have a different experience. But I still think underpinning that is the fact that you wanted to still have like this connection or this shared understanding with other folk. And I do think AI can help with that. And I think there's a massive problem, honestly. And I think it's a massive opportunity because, as you say, and we'll have episodes on this of how work will be certainly displaced by AI. You're going to need to do something with a whole lot of spare time. And I think we weren't necessarily made to just, all of us weren't necessarily made to work infinite hours and like really strive. Some people want to just consume, and being able to find what people you want to like interact with and what content you want to consume might be a lot easier in the AI world. Thoughts, disagreements?
No, I guess I'm an optimist on the jobs angle. Like it's mostly a question of, is AI so different that, because all the technological revolutions prior to AI, we ended up making a lot more jobs in total. That's not to minimize the transition, right? If you were a horse farrier and then we transitioned to cars, it's not a good time. So I'm not minimizing the transitional cost. But we would have to make the case here that this is so net different that we're not going to end up in a more abundant world full of more creative opportunities that maybe are different, but that there will be more of them. And that might be true here. I don't know. I have reading too much history makes you think that like everybody thought their age was special, and they actually just ended up following the pattern. And the pattern was like hard transition, and then more opportunities at the end. Is that the same here? I don't know. I have no idea. We're going to find out together, but it has been true historically, and so we have to. And historically, there was always this problem, right? There was oh my God, it's going to end everything. How dare we introduce factories? How dare we introduce the book? I mean, you can go all the way back to the book, and people are like, this is going to ruin people's memory. You have Greek philosophers talking about like writing things down causing a loss of memory, and this isn't the way knowledge should work. And I think that experiment worked out, right? People are sharing more knowledge than ever before, and the internet kind of poured gasoline on that. So I don't know. I don't know if this happens. If this one's different, there's always a chance it is. It's fundamentally different, and then history maybe doesn't guide us on that. But I tend to think of an AI-enabled world as still having a lot of roles for people. I tend to agree with the Naval Ravikant quote that the average company size trends to 1 over time, right? You just start having such capabilities that people start making hyper-specific businesses that are, and you're seeing that in the creative world. 3D printing especially blew this wide open, right? I don't need to have a whole factory run of something. I can make, my farmer's market has a guy that makes 3D printed dragons, right? And this is a tiny town. Do we just get more of that? Do we get people making hyper-specific content? I don't know.
Honestly, I hope so. I hope people find their niche, they find what they want to do, and they explore the creative side as opposed to moving numbers in a spreadsheet, right? Like maybe we look back and like from a historical context and we're like, wow, those were the dark ages where we kind of just, like went to middle management, kind of wasted our time sitting in traffic, doing things we didn't really want to do. And as you say, maybe the next shift is roles that are, specific, that focus on what you are passionate about or what others might be passionate about. So I hope it moves to that thing where people feel a bit more agency, right? They're like, I'm actually given I can do anything, I'm going to focus on the thing I want to do and find the folks that also are interested in this and trade and so on. So I think it will be a very interesting time. I'm hopeful, but I think it's at a very critical time to make sure we're adjusting on the right path.
We already have some of that, right? People look back at data entry before computers as insane, right? They're like, wow, like there's just these armies of typewriters and these armies of people with pads and papers just calculating. So will we look back and to your point, I think COVID made everybody look back at commutes and go, oh, I really was wasting a lot of time in the car. I got a lot of podcasts listening in, but I was wasting a lot of my day. What is going to be that looking backwards from AI? I don't know.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Next time on.
Yeah, in 3 years on the Feature Crew podcast. No, and this is always fun, right? Like, I want to pull us back a little bit to, we have a couple more things, I think, to discuss from, like, recent updates. And, well, we're always talking about, like, you know, I think generally in this world, it's like, oh, who's making the biggest model? And, you know, last week we talked about Llama 403B and how that was getting all the attention. But last week we also had GPT-40 Mini, which you know is a version of GPT-40 that supports text and vision, I guess, not speech or audio yet on this model. I think that's planned. But the key piece is that it's priced at 15 cents per million input tokens, which is like I think order of magnitude lower than GPT 3.5 or maybe 2, and you know significantly lower than any of the GPT-4 family models previous. And it's maintaining a lot of the capabilities, right? It's benchmarking really well. And then, and so we obviously don't have the actual parameter size of any OpenAI models because, you know, the open is debatable. But Google also put out a model, like a very small model this week, which we mentioned at the top of the show, the Gemma 2B. And 2 billion parameters is a very small model, right? Like,
to level set, what's 4 at right now? Estimated?
Oh, estimate? I don't even know. I mean, they don't tell us, right? But
we're in the hundreds of billions of parameters, right?
Yeah, I would say like GPT-4, at least GPT-4o, I would guess at around the like roughly 70 billion, maybe less.
70. Okay.
Maybe, I mean, that's total just off the top of my head. I don't know, right?
From off the top of my head as well, I feel like 2 billion quantized might start to fit under 4 gigabytes, right? Like you might actually be able to put it in like consumer hardware.
Yes.
Oh, really like low level consumer hardware sort of thing, right?
Right. Yeah. So if it's quantized to 4, what did you say? Like 4-bit quantization?
Yeah. As in like basically, well, how big would 2 billion by itself not even quantized be?
We have to do some quick math.
Yeah. I don't know. But what I'm saying is like just kind of napkin padding in my head. Basically, it's getting so small now that you can actually feasibly run these things. You could always run SLMs, but I think the more impressive thing is it's operating a very, very good intelligence, right? Like on the benchmarks and stuff, they were mad impressive
for
the size. 4 gigabytes. Okay.
4 gigs.
So like you could actually definitely buy a graphics card and not have to wait like a billion years or spend tens of thousands of dollars to be able to run this thing. Like
so it's 4 gigabytes at floating point 16, so completely unquantized. I imagine FP16 is their baseline. And so like that's a good point. It's getting really accessible. And just like I think the question with these small models is always people love to say, oh, it's like the new small model, but then the question is always like, oh, actually, how well it's performing. And I think one of the key things about at least the models we've been seeing recently, GPT-40 Mini, Gemma, like I haven't personally tried them super. I've only tried GPT-40 Mini a little bit, and I didn't notice any big problems. And the real thing I noticed is that like from the time I hit submit and then I blinked and the entire screen was full of text, right? So it's it's basically instant inference, right? Which is that's a big deal.
That gets pretty cool.
And the fact that it's still benchmarking well with infinite inference is like, and somehow this is flying under the radar. Like somehow Twitter is still talking about 403B that nobody can run, right? So anyways, I'm curious about your thoughts on that, like the difference between like small models that actually work, big models that can actually be run. Like where should the attention be?
I mean, from my perspective, you need, I think, movements in both. I think unfortunately small language models are way underlooked because I think people want the next big thing, right? They're looking at like I want the next Lamborghini upgrade, right?
Right.
Great to see the next Lamborghini upgrade, but realistically, it costs a shitload. These things cost so little, run so cheaply. To me, these are like the Toyotas, and they are actually the things that everyone uses and runs.
Nice.
And that is exactly what you need to look at, because as this becomes like table stakes, your cheap model that is so inexpensive can be run for everything, and suddenly you're going to see sparks of intelligence because you're running it all the time. The Lamborghini, you don't typically drive a lot because it costs a lot. If it gets like, anything goes wrong with it or whatever, taking that analogy, it's like you kind of leave it parked in the garage and you admire it, right?
Right.
So I see it as we want the next big models from OpenAI because it's this new like iPhone moment, right? It's the new hot thing. But actually seeing continuous upgrade at such a fast amount of time relative to the tech space, it's incredible for small language models, right? As you said, it's orders of magnitude. I think most, the audience might not necessarily fully always appreciate this. That's insane in any technology, right? It's only been like 2 years, right? Like when was GPT-2, right? Oh, sorry, GPT-2, like probably 2021, 2022. Like it's only a couple of years later. It's now way more intelligent, way faster, and cheap, right?
Yep.
Like that is, to me, pretty insane. And as you say, it's kind of flying under the radar. But I think this is like a pretty significant technological advancement. And again, just to underpin it, like the intelligence is good, right?
Yes.
Like this then kind of proves that as you get bigger models, you can then get the smaller models with just as good, like not just as good, but very good intelligence. So once you get like this immeasurably smart, large language model, you'll have like a measurably, massively intelligent small language model that runs fast and cheap. And that's amazing.
And I think there's actually an interesting point hidden in there where you were like, oh, when was GPT-2? Like 2019, 2020? 2019, 2020 was GPT-3. And GPT-2 was even earlier. But so it's just interesting to see, like, it. Since then, there's been a lot of improvement.
Yeah.
But then even just in the last year has been insane.
Speeding up.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think people appreciate that. And I don't think people and part of it, I actually chuckle. Like I laugh out loud when I'm watching Bloomberg TV or whatever, and I'm hearing them talk about like, like where are those, where are those return on investment for AI? I'm like, dude, it's right there. I mean, it just doesn't look monetary yet to you.
Right,
but
right.
Oh my God, they got what they wanted out of it. They got more than they wanted out of it. And we operate like on a slightly longer time frame than a quarter or a year or fiscal year, right? But like it's happening, and it's happening fast.
Yeah.
Well, it takes time for all these businesses to figure out how to integrate these things too, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the technology exists, and then you have businesses downstream of that they got to spin up their group. They got to figure out what's going on. They got to start assessing. I mean, there's a whole learning curve, even beyond the model improvement speed, that it will take a little bit of time. We'll see it.
Definitely. Jake and I were talking about this today, actually, of my kind of take. I think this was talked about maybe by on the Dorkish podcast or something, where I kind of agree with the sentiment of you need an overabundance of intelligence for even more people to pick it up. So right now, the models are kind of at the state where like you still need to work to integrate them. Imagine, GPT 5, 6 onwards, and now there's less work to integrate it. It's just smart enough to kind of pick up what you need. Then suddenly I think there's then a quick explosion of people like, wow, just like jam it in and sparks of intelligence running all the time. So now I think, unfortunately, even though it's like good enough for a lot of use cases, smaller companies are not going to spend like, hiring 10 software engineers to help integrate AI into all their different bits and pieces. They're just going to use the GPT wrapper startup that costs $5 a month, right? Much cheaper than hiring an engineer. But later
I was going to say they're
going
to put all their engineers on that and leave the old products to fall apart. But
yeah. But I think in the future where you have smarter models, it might bridge that gap. I do agree though that I think a lot of the kind of business world might be not baking in the fact that this is longer than a quarter.
Yeah.
This is it's really, really going fast. And as Jacob said, like it's so true that the rate it's going is going faster and faster, right? The exponential scaling laws are still applying.
There's a precedent for Wall Street not understanding investments like that. I mean, AWS is the canonical example, right? People see AWS as like an obvious decision now, but it was insane at the time. It was nuts to be dumping all this CapEx into building servers to host, other people's websites? Like, huh? What's that all about? And that turned out to be one of the greatest investments Amazon ever made. And you see a similar trend with AI, where big companies making huge bets, getting second guessed for those bets, and getting told and telling the people second guessing, hey, it'll pay off eventually. And Wall Street likes to operate quarter to quarter, so that makes sense to me. I think back to the smaller model discussion, there's a lot of use cases where speed really, really matters. And translation comes to mind. Like, we're getting to a place where I can have a translator across, say, the top 50 languages on Earth in my pocket and translating real time, no internet connection. I can be out in rural anywhere, and we can have a real time conversation getting translated through.
Yep.
There's a use case of why do you want a small model on a phone? Why does this matter? Like, all of that starts to get really interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever used a mushroom detection or plant detecting app. We live up in the mountains here. We use them fairly regularly. They kind of suck right now because they take a long time. You got to do all these photos of it. You can't do a video pan of it. You got to photo, select. With these models, you're talking about real-time object detection. The ability to start doing these things at speed and scale is crazy. That starts to add such a level of trust to this too. It doesn't feel so tethered to the server.
Yep. Insane. So yeah.
And look, I guess to sum it up a little bit, it's we have, and I pulled this up just so we could see that of course this is the Google selected benchmark, right? And this in fact is actually just Arena, the chat arena, the LLMs arena, but just seeing even if it just appears to normal people who are at a cursory glance it's as good as models 4 times its size or Llama 270B, right? 35 times its size, right? That's incredibly impressive. And if nothing else is a sort of an indication of what's to come from other foundation model houses. And an incredible trend. And so a couple weeks ago, Karpathy said something like, I think we could probably make a really, really smart model with less parameters than GPT-2. We're just being really inefficient with training. And, that's an easy thing to say, but it was kind of prophetic because it's it's happening, and it's going to continue happening probably.
Yep. I think this gets to the point of, we've talked about it before, but it feels like we're not even using all the intelligence our models currently have today.
Right.
So that's the super exciting thing of we're getting all these kind of empirical and academic research piling up of we can make things even smarter with more parameters. We can then take the smarter things and distill it down. We can use both weak and strong models to train each other. And we still aren't even using all the performance we have because they're so new, right? You literally get it. And then it's it takes time to use it and figure out how to best, even interact with it. So I'm sure very bullish on.
I'm sure we'll do an episode on it, but I think part of this is a UI layer problem. Take a simple problem for your average user. I have a bunch of documents or a bunch of PDFs somewhere, and I would like to query against them. Good luck. Good luck right now. Good luck right now doing that. Even though the models are fully capable of it, given the context window sizes, which for the audience is the amount of information I can send to this thing in a single query, it can handle books worth of data, but good luck getting it there. We haven't built these layers to make the average person really grok that this thing can do this stuff, and some of that feels like an interface problem to me.
And so then the canonical example of an interface problem being solved and technology enabling an interface problem being solved is the new voice mode, right? OpenAI's new voice mode. And I think it's worth talking about a little bit now because it's rolling out this week, and we've gotten to see the the first demos popping up on Twitter, and so I don't know. I guess just what are your guys' thoughts on the voice mode? I know we're all excited to get our hands on it, but
huge.
How do you see it affecting AI and affecting it's really the public perception of AI because it's not enabling that many things that we couldn't already do. It's more of making it easier to access and improving the experience greatly.
I think it shows how much little humanizing tweaks matter, right? The fact that I can interrupt it makes it feel way more human. The fact that it has these vocal inflections, that it has breathing. I know Tech Twitter makes fun of it, and Tech Twitter talks about how they want super speedy, 4x podcast speed responses. And that is not what most people want. Most people want this thing to sound human, to sound interested in what they're talking about, to be encouraging. And getting that stuff right is magic. That is a very cool thing to have pulled off, and it feels very humanizing for the technology. It feels like a much better version of Siri and things that people are used to. I think people in tech also underestimate how used Siri is. People in tech, we would almost rather, be
Type it
hit
out,
by a
yeah.
car than talk out loud to our computer on a bus or in a public situation or in a cafe. This is not true generally. Like, people use the heck out of Siri.
Yep.
And so I think this starts to seem incredibly powerful. And then the other piece is their iPad demo. So if you pair the voice mode with being able to show it stuff on your screen, that is a very special moment in computing that I think won't get a big play at first, but the fact that somebody can just say, hey, this is happening on my screen, help?
Yep.
Whoa. Like, that's way different.
I mean, to double click on 2 points here, I think first of all, you're so right about the humanizing, and it's always interesting going back to just the Siri example. Previously with speech recognition, again, you needed to get that to that critical point where 90% accuracy is ass, like no one uses it. But once you get to 95, suddenly it's this incredible thing. Like that's the voice system we had. And same with this, right? It's like voice mode currently that's the like not released variant was like good but not great, and then suddenly you add a few more things, and then it's just like. And Jacob, I know you use voice mode and already very good. So I just think like this is like another thing of it's gone a little bit further, and you get that curve of you have the tech enthusiast who will pick it up and actually understand it's already good. And you get a little bit more performance out of it, and suddenly you just have this, and like so many people are more ready to use it, right? It just hits that critical mass. I think the other thing from an engineering perspective that's great here, the voice and being able to see video, those are two separate signals, like signal types that haven't been inputted into models as easily yet. Exactly to your point, Chris, of good luck getting like books worth of data in, even though it can work with it. Now suddenly voice, previously we wouldn't record everything, right? Not many people, as Jacob said, are creators. So all that conversation that you usually have is just lost, right? And the AI could do so many interesting things if it had that. Same with the computer screen, right? Like it doesn't have a visual of what you're looking at. So you see it, and in your memory, you're like, come on, like you just need to know that this is here. And most consumers are going to be like, the system is dumb, right? Like, of course it needs to know that I'm in Internet Explorer or I'm in X, like I'm using it there, right? And then suddenly the AI is actually able to generalize over that if it had that data. So I think that's the next step of making it so much easier to get that signal. And that will be, again, another flywheel, right? Now it has all this extra information. It appears more intelligent, but it's the same model. Like literally all you've done is just given it more data, and it's like, yum, 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 here's now a useful, seemingly smart thing. Like that's all it needed. And then suddenly in the next couple of years, it's like, okay, well now we've got all this data. We understand how to better use it, better tweak it. Great. So I think it's honestly super impressive. I know 4.0 got a lot of hype before, and clicking on Jacob's point again, I think a lot of people are kind of not grokking how much progress we're actually making. I think right now it's like 4.0, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, both of you. We haven't had the voice mode for like, 2-3 months. I think a lot of it has been safety. I see a lot of people being like, why isn't it now, blah, blah, blah. But I still think there's a lot of red teaming and stuff that needed to go into this. And even getting it out.
As somebody who's had to demo something live on stage, the fact that they demoed it live on stage means it was ready to ship. Yeah, it could have shipped. It could have shipped at the demo day, but Dylan's right. They for some reasons, probably safety, maybe election, whatever it is, they are taking a very cautious approach to this and a very slow rollout.
What I was going to say, within 2 seconds on Twitter, you saw people trying to get it to do a Joe Biden voice or a Donald Trump voice, right? Like that was immediately what people go to. So you're going to see this. Yeah. You're going to see it. They probably had to do a lot to teach it not to do a Nigerian prince scam.
Yeah.
Because if I could just pump this audio, like if I can hook this up to a phone call.
To phone.
And I can call. There was some CEO or executive recently in Europe, I want to say, that successfully identified a scam call using an AI voice technology that was talking to them. And how they solved it was they said it was impersonating a fellow executive, and he said something to the effect of, "What was that book we talked about yesterday?"
Yeah.
And the AI couldn't know that because it didn't have that context. So,
oh my God, we're using like espionage tactics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Figure out.
It's a digital Cold War. Yeah.
Crazy.
Like that's what spies do, right? It's like you seed shit to try to figure out if they know. Yeah, it's like it's wild.
Insane. But I mean, and even to say, like, was it really cautious? Like, in my opinion, 3 months to release a feature, maybe we're kind of getting too hyped. And I do think there's a certain subset of people who are very bullish and like, wow, like we're gonna have ASI by like 2023, right? Like they're just like, it should have been yesterday. I want it now. 3 months to release something so impactful with so much capability, it's not a lot of time at all. I still think OpenAI is moving at a very impressive rate for consumer-facing product for the size they're at. They're now like a multi-billion-dollar business, right? You can't just. It's not like they're a scrappy startup anymore. They are this huge company that has responsibility, in my opinion. And I know maybe accelerators are going to make no, like they should immediately release it. But I think the situation's changing, right? We're going from something that was like ChatGPT, maybe it will be a cool tech demo, to now being like, ooh, like there can be a lot of harm done by these things, and we need to be a little bit more careful, even if it's ready to go.
I know what you're saying, but I think there is an element of like, if you want to be a consumer technology company, you need to release things soon after you announce them. That's what all the consumer technology companies do. There's a reason why Apple has a big event and then ships stuff 3 minutes after or whatever. Like pre-orders start that day, right? And
except Apple Intelligence.
Except so that's a point on Apple Intelligence, but with everything else they ever do, it's very quick. There's a reason why we don't do that at Microsoft, and there's a reason why we announce things a little earlier and let companies, our customers, tell us how they feel about it, and we can incorporate some of that into the work we're doing. And so there are different incentives, and I think if OpenAI asked for this backlash. They decided to announce the thing 3 months before they were willing to ship it, and they showed it live on stage. They made it very clear it was ready, and then they didn't ship it. So it's like I actually don't feel bad for them at all. They chose this.
Part of the speculation is also, do they time it relative to competitors, right? So if another offering comes out and shows a great voice mode, do they feel compelled to have to respond?
And isn't this the SAM thing? It's like he wanted to be a consumer tech company, but he wants to be a power player more, and so that's what he chose this time. Could be, right?
And I do think their learning should just be like, in my opinion, don't announce, right? Like I still think this voice mode. I haven't seen any other competitors get even close to how fast and how humanized this is and all that. So I just think they need to kind of recognize. But I mean, it's hard, right? We're seeing this with 2020 backwards view. They kind of needed to announce this, in my opinion, to flex, right? To be like, we're still on top. We got stuff coming out. Even then, everyone was like, is this really a new model? Is this blah, blah, blah? Like is it her? Whatever. So if they waited 3 months, I could totally understand where they feel like the momentum's not in their favor.
So why do we think that is? Is that because right now a lot of the revenue in AI comes from developers? And developers are a little more tuned into what's happening? Because Apple doesn't do this, right? Apple will let Android have a feature for 5 years that they don't add, and then suddenly drop, and then they just have a whole press run on why they're better in every way. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but they're good at convincing the market it's true.
Yep.
Is it because they're going after this developer audience? Because from a consumer point of view, from talking to my dad point of view, he could wait another year. That's what I mean. As long as it's great and works awesome when it comes out, then his perception is OpenAI is the greatest company.
Well, but he's not an OpenAI fan, right? Like when you're
right, but why service the fans with the announcements? Why do we care what the fans think if you're OpenAI?
Because you're building a brand, right?
Well,
there's a reason why this is the reason why Steve came out with the hello and everything needed to be perfect, and we need to demo the iPhone this day and this way, and the engineers are like, it's broken, we can't do it, but he's like, we got to do it, right? Apple does things differently now, and they can because they built their brand, right? I think.
Yeah. I think going back to when it was announced, this was again, we don't know any of the actual details. This was all theory crafting.
No insider info.
We have no inside knowledge, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I think it was pretty close to the Apple event. And I do wonder if there was something related to wanting to be seen as this really important player before the Apple kind of thing. Because I think afterwards it was then OpenAI is now part of Apple. So I don't know if they were maybe they really wanted to be that kind of power player, and they're just we have to show our cards a little bit earlier than we wanted to, because the 4.0 conference that they did was really scrappy. If you remember, it was weird amount of time, really weird slides. Was it for
they scheduled
OpenAI
for an
fans?
hour? They only did 30 minutes.
It was 30 minutes.
They cut it off early.
Lots of question mark. So I wonder if there was something behind the scenes where they're shit, we have to go right now. Let's just go. Or maybe they had some other things and they're like, no, we have to pull this back. And this is minimally, we have to show something impressive. So I wonder if there are a few things at play there that made them force their hand. And now they're like, ugh, we had to kind of learn from that. But again, they're now kind of nationalized, things that are a little bit different. So maybe they do things differently in the future. Maybe they don't have to do the whole, like, they can still do the hello thing. Like, I'm sure when GPT-5, 6, 7 gets announced, it's going to be like insanity, right? But I think the learning probably was, let's hold it a little bit closer to our chest and do red teaming before we actually give it out there, right? Like, all the theories about GPT-5 already being trained.
But
probably
I think
true, right?
there's an increased there's probably an increased voice on that internally to OpenAI, right? When you put a national security guy on your board, you're going to end up with more awareness of threats than maybe you would have had in whatever tech bubble you were in, right?
Right.
And so I think part of that is, you know, the Spider-Man quote, great power, great responsibility. You're starting to have people remind you of the responsibility of these things now. And so that makes sense to me, that you start to slow down and go, oh, shoot, I didn't think about all these threat models that folks that are in that space think of.
Yeah. And I think the sad thing is, like, as you say, like that word slowing down. I think the progress is not slowing down. It's, I think, the responsibility that you have. And this is not, I'm not trying to get at a EAC versus deaccelerator sort of thing. I'm actually getting to the point of, I think they know that with each next step, you want to be first, but you need to be very careful with how you are first, right? Because that could do reputational brand damage now, right? Like if you put something out that just gets completely jailbroken, completely misused, people are going to be like, we can't trust OpenAI. And now when they're like, no, please, GPT-7 is here, and it literally is AGI.
Everybody's like, no, we're going to save super intelligence. We're going to get Ilya's problem.
Yeah.
Maybe famous last words. Maybe they just immediately put out GPT-7 and everyone's like, well, it's AGI, who cares?
Well, it's over. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, AGI is GPT-6. I think we know that. There's no GPT-7.
Yeah, there you go.
I think GPT-5.
That's our place. You heard it here first.
People are going to spend a lot of energy arguing over if GPT-5 is AGI. I'm calling it now.
Agree, 100%.
That's going to be the big conversation.
And then to that point, do you think there's going to be an AGI as a spectrum, or do you think they're going to try and do like a hard cut, like a hard line? Because
I think you keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah,
all the time.
I think you keep. I think company-wise, you keep moving the goalposts because you don't want to say we achieved AGI. And then from the people side, I think everybody's going to argue over the terminology forever. We can't even agree on simple facts. So I mean,
especially because isn't there a clause in? I don't have any insider knowledge in this, but isn't there a clause in OpenAI's investment contracts or sort of their documentation that when they call something AGI, then you've flipped a switch. Like there's a different sort of business happening. There's investment consequences to that. So AGI is a loaded legal term for them. That represents a step change in the company.
It's wild that they would be able to put that in there when it's a term with no definition.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, there is some mechanism for how that's identified, but I think they have a lot of incentive not to call it AGI until it is unavoidably AGI.
Interesting. Okay, something to keep in mind.
So we can verify that for next time. We'll come back with some more details on it, but I think that's true.
Totally. And then, I mean, this is just another random point. Has the Turing test officially been broken? Like, just as an example, being
crushed.
It must have been, right? Like, we're talking about character AI and like the fact that you can talk to
voice mode definitively probably kills it, but I think it's already been passed.
Yeah, we're inventing new Turing tests all the time because the original Turing test is donezo.
Right. But like, isn't that crazy that just in the last few years we went from will the Turing test ever be broken? Like, don't think computers will get that smart to now having not just text but voice that you can barely tell the difference of.
Right.
Like, we went from the intercom, chatbot that everyone hated to like people falling in love with character AI characters. That is wild.
Yeah. And imagine character AI now when you start being able to generate any kind of voice, the voice is like natural. I mean, I don't know. The sky's the limit with this stuff, and it does paint in my mind a very bullish picture for entertainment.
Her movie review coming soon, so we can talk about the consequences of having breathy-friendly AI that you can talk to at all hours.
That's a thumbnail right there. She breathy.
Totally.
All right, we should probably start wrapping things up, right?
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely,
good place to do it. Yeah.
But I think as always, ask the audience, give us your feedback. Tell us what you want to hear. Like, do you want to hear movie reviews? Do you want to hear see us try AI products? We're going to keep doing these news updates, but we're looking for ways to give more content and make more interesting stuff. So let us know, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye. Awesome. I'm going to stop it there.